Welcome to Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into something most of us carry constantly, your smartphone. We've got this really fascinating collection of insights here, focusing on an article about something called the invisible phone. And it really makes you question some basic ideas about these devices.
It's quite striking, actually. The source material, it's from a well-known tech privacy advocate, and it basically argues that almost all the phones we buy, Apple, Samsung, Google, they're not just tools for us.
Right.
They're engineered, fundamentally, for continuous surveillance. So our mission today is to unpack that idea and then look at what truly open source alternatives might offer.
So what does all this mean for you if you care about your digital privacy? Is a spy-free phone even possible anymore? Okay, let's get into it. So the article kicks off with a pretty bold claim that these mainstream phones, they're basically designed from the ground up to track you, record what you do, profile your behavior.
Yeah, and it's not vague. The source gets specific about the mechanisms. For instance, location tracking that's built deep into system-level apps.
The core stuff.
Exactly. The stuff the article says you just can't turn off. Then there are the unique hardware identifiers. Think of it like a permanent digital fingerprint for your phone.
Okay.
And that gets linked straight to your Apple or Google account. So persistent identification. It even talks about cross-device tracking, following you when you switch to your laptop, for example.
And things like Siri or Google Assistant.
The source claims those interactions and just general app usage are recorded and tied back to who you are.
Wow. And here's where it gets, really interesting for me. The source argues the real danger isn't just, say, catching criminals. It's that everyone is under surveillance by default.
Right.
Just by using the phone as intended.
Yeah.
That's quite a perspective shift, isn't it? Privacy isn't the default.
It really flips the script. If you connect that to the bigger picture, it suggests the standard operating procedure for nearly every phone out there is constant watching, often without us really truly consenting in a meaningful way. Which naturally makes you ask, what does that do to our sense of privacy, our sense of control in this digital age?
Okay, so if the standard phones are, as the source claims, constantly watching, what's the way out? The article brings up this idea of open source phones, a path to maybe taking back some control.
Yeah, these are mainly phones running what's called the Android Open Source Project, AOSP.
Yeah.
You could think of it as like the base version of Android, but cleaned up, stripped of all the Google surveillance components. The source also mentions Linux-based systems briefly as another path, though maybe not quite as ready for prime time just yet.
And the fundamental difference is?
The key thing, according to the source, is they don't automatically log you into third-party servers. No Google login, no Apple login by default.
Yep.
That removes the biggest identifier right there, your account.
So potential anonymity.
Exactly. True anonymity becomes possible. And what's really fascinating, structurally, is that because it's open source, developers can actually look at the code.
Right, audit it.
Yeah, check for any hidden spyware. That transparency is just a world away from the closed ecosystems of Apple and Google, where you basically just have to trust them.
Okay, that sounds good in theory. But practically speaking,
Yeah.
what are some examples? And are there, downsides or limitations?
The source lists a few. Lineage OS gets mentioned a lot, seems to be the most widely supported. Then there's EOS or EODOS, that's one they demoed in the article. It's based on Lineage, but adds more privacy stuff out of the box.
Okay.
If you have a Google Pixel phone, there are specific ones like Graphene OS and Calyx OS. LunarOS is mentioned for Brax phones, which are less common. And EOS is apparently bigger in Europe.
But here's a potential snag the article points out clearly. Samsung and Apple phones, you can't just switch them over to these systems. Why not?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's because their hardware is locked down tight. And the core system apps are deeply embedded. It's not just like installing a new app. The whole architecture is designed to prevent you from swapping out the operating system like that. It's a walled garden, essentially.
Got it. Okay, so let's say you can switch. Maybe you get a Pixel or compatible device. The next big question is probably apps, right? If I ditch Google, how do I get my apps? What about Google Play?
That's a fair question. But the benefit, the source argues, is huge. By avoiding Google Play and the background Google services, the phone simply stops reporting all that data back to Google.
What data exactly?
Your location, which apps you're using, what you search for, that fire hose of data just gets turned off, according to the article. That's a massive privacy gain right there.
Okay, but seriously, where did the apps come from?
Good alternatives exist. The source highlights the Aurora store It apparently mirrors Google Play, lets you download the same apps, but anonymously not tied to your Google account.
Interesting.
APK Pure is mentioned as a backup, though maybe a bit spammy, according to the author. And then there's F-Droid. That one's different. It's only for open source app.
And vetted somehow.
Yeah, manually reviewed for spyware, the source claims. So perhaps a higher trust factor there if the app you need is open source. But there's a catch, a potential challenge. A lot of Android apps, even ones you get from Aurora, actually need Google services running in the background to work properly.
Ah, okay. For things like notifications or maps.
Exactly. Push notifications, location services.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of apps rely on those Google APIs. So it could seem like you're stuck choosing between privacy and functionality, a real deal breaker for some.
And this is where, again, things get quite clever. The solution offered is something called MicroG.
Right, MicroG. It's basically a lightweight open source replacement for Google services.
A substitute.
Yeah, designed to fool apps into thinking Google services are there, providing just enough functionality like notifications, location, but without sending all your data back to Google. It mimics the necessary parts without the surveillance.
Huh. That sounds elegant.
It really is. It handles those critical background functions, making way more apps compatible than you might expect. And the source notes that systems like OS often come with MicroG pre-installed.
Making the switch smoother.
Much smoother, yeah. It addresses that major compatibility hurdle pretty effectively.
So let's put it all together. For someone actually using one of these phones day to day, what's it like? Is it a huge adjustment? Does it feel weird?
The article actually stresses that if you're coming from Android, the user experience feels remarkably familiar.
Really?
Yeah. Same basic gestures, similar layouts. App compatibility, thanks to things like MicroG and Aurora Store, is described as surprisingly good. The main difference you'd notice is probably how you install and update apps using F-Droid or Aurora instead of Google Play.
But the big win the article emphasizes is no forced login to Google or Apple, right?
Exactly. No mandatory sign-in screen when you set up the phone. That's what enables that potential for true anonymity. Your activity isn't automatically linked to your name, your email, your phone number in the same way. That's a fundamental shift.
A different baseline.
A completely different baseline for privacy. So looking at the big picture, the source essentially concludes that making the switch today involves relatively small adjustments for the user.
Okay.
You keep most of your app functionality, but you gain a massive improvement in digital privacy. It frames it as small sacrifices for potentially huge gains.
And the article's author mentions a feeling, a psychological aspect.
Yeah, describes it as a feeling of relief, just knowing you're not being constantly monitored by the device in your pocket. A release from that perpetual observation.
That idea of just feeling free from your own phone watching you, that's powerful. It's not just about data points, it's about a state of mind. So to recap this deep dive, we've looked at how the source argues mainstream phones have surveillance baked in, this concept of the invisible phone. But then we explore these open source alternatives, AOSP, Lineage, others, and how tools like MicroG make them practical, usable options.
And it really does raise a broader question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Our devices are so woven into our lives now. How much do we actually understand about what they're doing in the background?
Yeah.
All those unseen data transfers happening constantly.
Yeah.
And maybe how much do we truly value controlling that information flow, even if it means tweaking a few habits, using a different app store, thinking a bit more consciously about our setup.
So maybe the next time you pick up your phone, the real question isn't just what it knows about you, but maybe, what are you prepared to do about it? To actually own your digital footprint and perhaps find that sense of relief the article talks about, that freedom from feeling constantly watched.